Hey, and welcome to day 7, where we'll talk about the science of virtue, how to live a happy life. And this involves finding your core values. It's kind of the macro level, and it's very important for meditation. I'd like to start with a quick story. When I was meditating and training under my teacher, Bhante Vimalaramsi, I was sitting there, and all of a sudden this memory came up. And it was when I was about 4 years old. I had stolen a small plastic piece of, it was a Lego block that was a pizza, and I thought it was really cool when I was 4, so I put it in my pocket when I was over at my friend's house. And I went back home, and eventually I broke down crying out of guilt. I felt so guilty, and I went over and I had to return it to my friend, and it was a traumatic early moment for me. And I had forgotten about that memory, but it came up in meditation over 2 decades later. So why does the mind hold on to these things? Like, what was that little voice, that conscience that told me that was not a good thing to do? Well, I think we all have this in us. And one of the insights that the ancient wisdom traditions found is that it's necessary for a stable mind to listen to this inner conscience and to really do our best to be good. So virtue can be a complex topic. There's all sorts of philosophy around it. What is a truly good act? But we can simplify it, and many of the wisdom traditions talk about and emphasize that intentions are what matter. Really looking inside our minds, and we get better at this the more that we meditate, the more meta-awareness that we build, and doing our best to do the right thing. Research on virtue has found that it's important for pro-social behavior, which is like getting along with others, for thriving and human flourishing, also known as eudaimonia, and for personality development. And it was also linked to vagal nerve activity, which is a measure of parasympathetic kind of relaxed mode of being, and linked to good relations, agreeableness, and trustworthiness, compassion, kindness. So it's not surprising that this is like an essential foundational ingredient for the good life and for living a happy life. Now, the wisdom traditions also laid out frameworks for avoiding kind of bad deeds or things that would cause a lot of turmoil in the mind. For example, there's Confucius's 5 virtues for a happy life, Christianity's 10 commandments, Aristotle's golden mean, which is more about developing good character traits. There's the Buddhist precepts and the Taoist 3 jewels. So I could go on with these. The Buddhist precepts, there's 5 of them for people who are not monks, and that is to avoid killing, stealing, cheating on one's partner, and lying or harsh speech, including gossip. And that's probably one of the most challenging for people. And then the 5th is to avoid intoxicants. So these are all related to mental fitness. It's avoiding things that would cause turmoil in our own lives and minds and damage our happiness and our relationships. And then also there's the positive aspect, which is doing good, giving, being charitable with others. One thing I found interesting in my research is that the Naskapi Indians said that generosity and metta, or loving kindness, bring us closer to the big self, what they called the great man, and lies and dishonesty drive him away. Now, I don't want to psychologize that too much, but I think about this in terms of meta-awareness. We have more awareness in the mind, that kind of all-encompassing awareness that is always there in the background. But when we do these selfish things, our mind kind of contracts down and we're isolated from it, and we lose our sense of awareness. I think it's kind of obvious that helping people makes us feel good. Maybe it's not obvious to everybody, but if you take a moment to remember the times, like remember the last time you did something just to help somebody out, and it probably felt really good. It's a subtler good feeling. It's not like an amped up, I won the game kind of feeling, but it's a very sustainable kind of balanced feeling. And this is very good for the mind and very good for mental fitness. There's been a couple of studies. There was a neuroimaging study that found that giving activates the brain's reward system. And another study found that buying for others actually produces more happiness for the giver than if they were to spend that money on themselves. So generosity is a huge win-win. And there's many ways to be generous. So a lot of us might think, well, I have so much going on, or I don't have the resources to give money. But often giving can be much more subtle than that. And it could just be smiling at a stranger or taking the time to really listen to somebody, especially if they're going through a tough time. We could send a caring voice message to a friend, could do someone else's laundry, or give a neck rub to your partner. These are all kind of generous ways that don't take a lot of time. And then often generosity involves some kind of sacrifice, like there's the last chocolate bar and we really want it, but there's that, all right, fine, I'll let go of that tight clinging of mine and I'll just offer to share part of it. And that's kind of the loosening of the self that this virtue brings. It kind of dissolves our tight, contracted sense of, it's all about me. And it opens up and kind of de-risks our portfolio so that we care about other people too. And that feels really good. And that's very good for the mind and for mental fitness. Now, this neuromodulator in the brain called serotonin was linked to prosocial behavior, so like generosity and caring for others. And this was found to also increase charitable donating. So there's kind of this positive feedback loop here where the more happy we become, then the better people we become. And then also the better people we become, the more happy we become because there's more joy. We want to give more because we have more for ourselves internally. All right, so this all sounds nice, but how do we put it into practice? Well, the 4 R's can also help us on a macro level with this in our daily lives. So the first is to recognize when we're thinking only of ourselves, which is a normal kind of thing to do. We get it caught up in me throughout the day, but we can recognize that, release those thoughts, and then relish in a generous act for somebody, which could be, again, something really small like holding the door for them. And then we remain in that kind of generous attitude, looking for ways we can be helpful to others. I like what Holocaust victim Anne Frank said. She said, "No one has ever become poor by giving." Again, this isn't just monetary. We give our time, we give our attention, we give what we can, but it always comes back to us in positive ways, from what I found. So eventually, with more meta awareness in our lives, as we gain a deep understanding of the mind and rest more in presence and kind of get ourselves out of the way, it's possible that virtue can become more effortless and spontaneous. It's like what the Taoist, the ancient Chinese philosophy, talks about as Wu Wei. It's this effortless action, and the idea that we'll respond spontaneously with the right action if we're in accordance with the way, the Tao. There's a quote from the Tao Te Ching saying, "The way never acts, yet nothing is left undone." It sounds like a riddle, but essentially, if the way I understand it is that as we develop this collectedness of mind, this ability to be present and not be trying to fix everything or fix others or fix ourselves, but we're resting and we have this kind of open-hearted metta, then naturally whatever comes along will respond in a way that's appropriate to the situation and helpful for others and ourselves. So that's what we can kind of aspire towards, or eventually aim the mind in that direction. But to start, it can take some effort to kind of rewire other habits that we've accumulated to be more self-centered. And the 4 R's are a great way to do that. So thanks for hearing me out on the subject. And the daily challenge is to write down your core values. I'd love to hear from you all, if you want to comment with your core values, it's probably different for a lot of us, and we can align more and more and live up to our highest form of integrity. So that's the challenge, and I'll see you here tomorrow for day 8.